Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Hello, salam, and Ramadan Mubarak. In this video, you're going to learn about the basics of Ramadan, what it is, why it matters, how is it celebrated, how does fasting work, and so on. So the month of Ramadan has begun. It is the ninth month of the Islamic calendar, which is lunar, and it is considered the most sacred of all months by Muslims. So why does it matter? The Quran reads, and I quote, "The month of Ramadan is one in which was revealed the Quran, a guidance for humanity with clear signs. So whoever sights the new moon of the month, let them fast. And whoever is ill or on a journey, if you're traveling, then an equal number of other days outside of Ramadan. God intends for you ease and does not intend for you hardship." This is verse 185 of chapter 2 of the Quran, where we get some information on fasting. So this is the month that the Quran, the sacred, most important text of Islam, was first revealed into the Prophet Muhammad. This month is so special that Muslims believe that every good deed that you practice, that you do, that you commit is multiplied by hundreds and thousands. Your blessings and your rewards from God are also multiplied by hundreds and thousands. Your blessings from God for all good intentions and all good actions, including fulfilling religious and other daily obligations. And for this and many other reasons, Muslims are especially more generous in the month of Ramadan. But before I get into the details of fasting, if you'd like to know how to greet a Muslim person at this time, Ramadan Mubarak. It means have a blessed Ramadan. The English equivalent is basically Happy Ramadan. This is probably the most common greeting that you might come across, but you have so many other options too, like Ramadan Kareem, which is a greeting that's basically welcoming the generosity that comes with Ramadan. It means something like have a generous Ramadan, or Ramadan is generous, or may God be generous to you during the month of Ramadan, or may you be generous during the month of Ramadan. The word Kareem in Arabic means generous. So you can say it in English too. You can just say Happy Ramadan or have a blessed Ramadan, and we'd be very happy to hear that. So if you have a Muslim friend, a colleague, a coworker, a neighbor, greet them with this, even if they're not fasting. But speaking of not fasting, I very much advise against asking about their fasting practices because some Muslims struggle with it. Some aren't able to fast, some don't want to fast and feel really guilty. Some have a complicated relationship with God or with Islam or with their community, and therefore they might not be currently fasting. And there's a lot of social and religious stigma attached to not fasting. So the question about whether they're fasting and how they're fasting and such might be triggering for some Muslims, and they might feel very uncomfortable sharing with you that they're not fasting. And that also reminds me that Ramadan equals Ramazan equals Ramzan. You might see the word Ramadan spelled with a Z, with a D, with a DH. They're all equivalents of an Arabic letter called Dad, and it's just pronounced differently in different Islamic languages like Zwad or Dad or Dad. All pronunciations are correct because languages are just so wonderful like that. Now for some general information about the month of Ramadan and of fasting. So when do you fast? It's not just from sunrise to sunset that we fast. It's actually from dawn to sunset. And fun fact, sunset here is debatable. Muslims do not agree on what God meant exactly when she said fast from this time to this time, because she didn't use the word sunrise or sunset or dawn. Quranic verse 187 of the second chapter tells us that the fast begins when we see, and I quote, "the light of dawn breaking the darkness of night." Literally, in the Arabic, it's something about being able to distinguish the white of dawn from the darkness of the night, and that the fast ends when night begins. So Shia and Sunni Muslims, who are the dominant branches of Islam, understand these verses on fasting and when to break the fast differently, and they don't break their fast at the same time. And this is why we have to be very careful to not say sunset as if that's the agreement, because it's not. And by fast, I mean not just from food. Yes, water too, but not just food and water, any sexual activity, any fighting, any speaking badly of others, any bad habits, hurting people, even anger, all of these things invalidate the fast, which means that eating or drinking anything at all except by mistake, unintentionally, or fighting with someone, or cheating, or lying, and so on, while you're fasting throughout the day, right, from the quote unquote dawn to sunset, breaks your fast. And when a fast is invalidated or it's broken, when it wasn't supposed to be broken, it means that you have to make it up outside of the month of Ramadan, and you have the entire year until Ramadan returns. How do you fast? Well, to begin your fast, you have several options. You may go to sleep as you normally would and then wake up at any time before dawn to eat your morning meal, because you want to be, surviving throughout the day as you're fasting. We have timetables that are calculated in advance that tell us when the fasting begins and when it ends. Another option is to eat before you sleep and only wake up at your normal time as you would outside of Ramadan. But this will mean that your fast will be much longer and you'll be hungrier much longer. And the idea is to do the best that you can to not have to break your fast out of necessity. And necessity, of course, is defined by you, the faster, the person who's fasting. Another option that I've seen is that you stay up all night until dawn. You eat and socialize. You're eating the entire time, and you're socializing with family and friends and neighbors, and you pray occasionally, and then you sleep once you have done your morning or your dawn prayer, and then you wake up in the middle of the day, and you don't have to worry about fasting the entire day anymore because you were asleep half the day. Yeah, some Muslim majority countries will adjust and readjust their workday during Ramadan so that you can do your fast just fine. I highly recommend visiting a Muslim majority country in Ramadan if you can. So then you fast all day while the sun is out, doing the best that you can to not break it if you don't have to, and then you break it. How do you break it? Well, all you have to do is to just eat or drink something real quick at the time that's designated for breaking your fast. You might then go and do your evening prayer, and then you come back and join your whole family or friends or community if you're eating with other people, and eat an entire meal with them. That meal is called iftar. Or you might just break your fast, finish your entire meal, and then go and do your evening prayer. Oh, speaking of breaking fasts, you might be seeing a lot of dates in grocery stores around the world. And that's because a lot of Muslims love and prefer to break their fast using dates. It's a small, delicious fruit, which is how the Prophet Muhammad broke his fast. So what does a person do while they're fasting all day? Throughout the day, you want to get as much prayer and closeness with God as possible. You may still go to work. In fact, you should still go to work and fulfill other obligations, and God rewards you for those. But you want to remember constantly that you're fasting. You try to worship in whatever ways that you can, to whatever extent that you can. So you might recite the different names of God. You might send blessings on the Prophet Muhammad and the Prophet Abraham. You might make sure that you do all of your 3 to 5 daily prayers on time. You might read the Quran as much as you possibly can throughout the day and throughout the entire month of Ramadan. The Quran has 30 parts, and there are 30 days in the month, and so you want to do like one part a day if possible. You might spend time, and you should spend time with other people and connect with others. You might visit places where you feel the presence of God and goodness to keep yourself spiritually grounded. You might volunteer in your community. You might give a lot of charity, and so on. There are a whole bunch of ways to worship God throughout the month of Ramadan and get the blessings that, again, are very, very much multiplied. All of this is supposed to be much easier in the month of Ramadan than outside of Ramadan because, fun fact, Muslims believe that Satan, the devil, is tied up in Ramadan, so can't tempt us to do evil, which means that your ultimate source of temptation is tied up and has no access to you. And then, so for those of us who still do evil, or who don't do good stuff or enough good things in Ramadan, or don't fulfill our very basic obligations and stuff, it means that we're just such lost causes that Satan has given up on us because we don't even need him anymore. What else does one do throughout the day as they fast? This depends very much on your gender and your location. So if you have a big family, if you have a big community, and you get together with others for a large meal to break your fast every day with, and you're a woman, you'll have very little time throughout the day to do anything but preparation for this very huge feast. And we know that cooking and housework and household chores are very, very gendered tasks. But if you have a smaller group to eat with, then you're probably not spending as much time cooking or preparing these meals, and you have more time to prepare for Ramadan and worship God instead. The bottom line is that too many women don't get as much of an opportunity to worship God throughout the day, or they're not able to take advantage of Ramadan as much as many men are. So who fasts? The basic answer is whoever can. There are so many exceptions to fasting, to the group of people who can fast. It's one of the things that I personally love so much about Islam, the flexibility of it, the practicality of it, how incredibly accommodating this religion is. So you fast if you can. The idea isn't to kill yourself or to make you suffer. On the contrary, the Quranic verses on fasting include a verse that God intends for us ease, not hardships. So people who are on medication for whatever reasons are exempt. Anyone to whose health fasting from food and or water is a danger is exempt. You're not required to fast while you're menstruating. You can if you want to, you're just not required to do so. I have another video on menstruation and fasting that I'm happy to provide the link to in the video description for this video. Nursing and pregnant people are exempt. Children don't have to fast. Anyone who hasn't attained puberty yet, there's no specific age. Anyone who is sick for just a few hours of the day or a whole day or of a more complicated illness or who's chronically ill is exempt from fasting. Anyone who's traveling long distance, and this is so negotiable. The Quran doesn't tell us what traveling long distance means or what traveling means. And so obviously traveling on a camel or a horse in the 7th century was, a tad more difficult than it is today. But still, you're not required or expected to fast while you're traveling. But while all of these groups are exempt from fasting, if anyone who falls into these groups is able to handle a fast, they are welcome and encouraged to go ahead and do the fast. So ultimately, the idea is that whoever can fast, who is able to fast, should fast. It's considered an obligation upon them to fast if they can. The can part is very important, and Muslims often emphasize the health component of ability, that everyone who fasts must be healthy enough to fast. What we don't often hear, though, is that our definition of healthy, of the word healthy over the last few decades has evolved, and it isn't the same as what it was in the past. So for example, today, we collectively as a humanity recognize the importance of good mental health. So even if the historical texts don't explicitly mention something like people who have depression don't have to fast or people with anorexia are exempt, we can still extend our definition of the word ability to include all components of health, not physical alone. I also include spiritual, emotional health in this. And again, you do what you're able to do. If you're a Muslim and you're listening to this and you've been told by someone else that you should fast, even though you personally know that you cannot handle a fast, trust yourself and don't fast. Don't discuss it with anyone else if they're going to just judge you and guilt you into fasting, because ultimately fasting is not about anyone else. It's just between you and God. Let's now talk about some of the technicalities that come with fasting. Some Muslims take fasting and the details of what breaks and makes a fast and who can and can't or who don't fast more literally than others. So they might ask questions that a lot of other people might find silly and irrelevant or missing the point. For example, you might hear something like, is my fast broken or invalidated if I taste my food as I'm cooking it? Or is a fast invalidated by, using toothpaste or accidentally swallowing mouthwash while you're brushing your teeth during a fast? They might ask, I broke my fast a couple minutes after sunset or before sunset. Is that okay? I was eating and there was still taste in my mouth from what I was eating, and the adhan, the call to prayer, happened and the fast had begun. Is my fast valid now? But in such cases, it's very important to remember that religion means different things to different people. And it's valuable and meaningful that some people care so deeply or this deeply about whether what they're doing is right or wrong according to God, whether they're doing something very, very right, exactly as God had intended, even if we can never really determine what God's intentions are. This isn't so much fun when they're forcing their views on you, their particular rules and specific details of fasting on you, but as long as they're not doing that, it's totally okay for them to have those views and those approaches to fasting. Now, you might be thinking, okay, this is all really, really fascinating and this is cool and I'm learning a lot, but why even fast in the first place? And we have to be careful here because I grew up to a very terrible explanation for why we fast, which is that we fast so we can understand how poor people live, what it's like to go hungry, and so on. Yikes. My loves, poor people also have to fast if they fit the criteria of people who have to fast. Hungry people also have to fast if they can. You don't break your fast just because you get hungry, unless the hunger is so serious, it's serious enough where it can damage your health, in which case most interpretations of Islam would require you to break your fast because preservation of health is one of the objectives of Islam. But Muslims give all kinds of reasons and explanations for why they fast. The Quran doesn't explain why other than that religious communities and people before us had to fast, or they did fast, or that it may help us become mindful of God. So we do it because the Quran prescribes it, because it's a thing that many religions have historically done and valued, and some religious communities continue to value it. I am personally not averse to comparisons with Lent, although for many Christians with Lent, you can decide whatever you fast from, whereas for Islam, generally the idea is that unless you are unable to fast the conventional way, you can't replace the rules for no food and water with something like, I'm gonna fast from Diet Coke for the next 30 days. You may fast your own way if you belong to any of the groups that are exempt from fasting. But religions that view fasting as a big deal mostly have treated it as a method to discipline humans. And anyone who has ever fasted knows how much discipline fasting requires. Not getting angry or controlling your emotions, not eating just because you're hungry or feel like it, not acting on any sexual desires, treating people with kindness even if you don't like them, even if they annoy you. All of this requires discipline. So that's my own explanation of it. It teaches me discipline, but also it makes me feel like I'm a part of something bigger than myself. I especially love the community aspect of Ramadan. Like, you get to break the fast together with a bunch of other people if you want, or you can start the fast with a bunch of other people if you like. Although with COVID, please be safe and careful. So I love knowing that most Muslims around the world, in any given city in the world, are fasting and celebrating this month. It's also the most generous time of the year in my experience. I've experienced that generosity, and it is gorgeous. But the bottom line here is that most Muslims fast because they consider it an obligation, a command from God in the Quran. But also, the same most Muslims have most likely found other reasons, more personal reasons to look forward to fasting, to encourage others to fast, to enjoy the fast, to appreciate it, and so on. Let's talk a little bit about fasting in general. Fasting is so meaningful and it's so symbolic that you don't fast just in Ramadan. There are many days designated throughout the Islamic calendar that are considered important for fasting, such as days that the Prophet Muhammad fasted on and recommended it to others as well. It's just that Ramadan fasts are religiously obligatory and one is accountable to God for fulfilling them or for not fulfilling them. Outside of Ramadan and outside of the recommended fasts, on other days, fasting is a way to expiate for certain sins or indiscretions that a person might commit. This means that if you've committed a certain act that you were not supposed to as a Muslim person, you can ask God to forgive you by fasting for a certain number of days with the intention that may God forgive you for having done the thing that you weren't supposed to do. But let's be careful here though. I don't want to be romanticizing Ramadan and fasting, and I certainly don't want to generalize so that it sounds like I'm talking about all individual Muslims or all Muslims anywhere. It should go without saying that Islam is an incredibly diverse religion and Muslims come in all kinds of beliefs and all kinds of ways of being Muslim. I mean, it's more than 1 billion of us, right? Ramadan is generally a very beautiful month, yes. And the rules are generally followed by most fasters, I imagine. However, especially for Muslims who live alone or Muslims who don't have a good community or who aren't on good terms with God or with Islam or with their community or with their families, or Muslims who have faced some serious challenges and this is the very first Ramadan that they're celebrating without a loved one, or Muslims who are new parents, especially mothers, or Muslims with an illness of any kind. These are all groups of Muslims who might struggle a lot during the month of Ramadan. They may not fast, they may hurt when fasting, they may dread this month, and they exist and they are important and they're still Muslim. So we don't want to pretend like fasting or Ramadan is a great time for everyone, because it's just not. If you, dear listener, are that person, I wish you well. I wish you beauty, I wish you good health, and I wish you peace. There are a lot of communities, online virtual communities, that are dedicated to Muslims who don't fast for whatever reasons, to help provide that community for them. So I hope you find your community. What happens when Ramadan finishes? Once Ramadan ends, the first day of the next month is the first day of Eid. There are 2 major Eids in the Islamic calendar, and the first one comes immediately after the fasting month ends, and it's called Eid al-Fitr, literally the Eid of breaking the fast. The second one occurs roughly 2 months and 10 days after the first one, and it's called Eid al-Adha, literally the Eid of sacrifice. Which reminds me, sadly, most Muslims take this literally and they sacrifice an animal. Some Muslims don't take it literally and they might interpret the sacrifice aspect as more metaphorically. It's a whole long story that we can talk about some other time. But for both Eids, you hang out with family and community and relatives and friends. There's a prayer with a sermon that happens at the mosque that you try to attend if you can. You greet each other with Eid Mubarak. You wear new clothes if you can afford them. You eat lots and lots of food with people that you love and hang out with. And depending on where you live and how many relatives you might have around you, you might visit as many of your relatives as you can in a given day. The first day is the most important day of Eid, but it lasts for 3 whole days, and Eid is a holiday in Muslim majority countries. Also, children get money, or grown-ups too might get money from other people as a gift for Eid, and that is called Eidi in some languages. Okay, so I think that is your what, why, when, who, how of fasting, and I hope that answers a lot of the questions that you might have had before this video. Stay kind, and I hope that you have a beautiful feminist Ramadan. Salam.